In this video, I'm going to show you how to make the part model for the SOLIDWORKS Intro to Modeling and Drawing part number 1. If you look, here's the drawing out of the lab manual. The drawing has a front and a top view. If you look over at the right pictorial drawing over here, the isometric drawing, you'll see we have the front, the top, and the right. And we are going to move on to SOLIDWORKS and model this part. So we're going to go back and forth between this drawing and the SOLIDWORKS environment. When I open up SOLIDWORKS, I'm presented with 3 different environments. I have the part environment, the assembly environment, and the drawing environment. The first step to creating a drawing is to model a part. So I'm going to click on part and press OK. This opens up the standard part environment. Looking at the part environment, I have tabs. I have features, I have sketches, then I've got some advanced tools like mold tools. You may not have that shown right now, but it is available in your SOLIDWORKS. I have evaluate, which allows me to measure stuff and perform different measurement activities to my model. I have some other SOLIDWORKS add-ins, such as simulation and motion, which we'll get to in an advanced video later on in the quarter. I have SOLIDWORKS CAM, then also HSMWorks CAM. We're going to pretty much focus on just features and sketches tab, ribbon bars. If we look, the design tree is over here on the left-hand side. And if you remember from the intro video, we have the front plane, the top plane, and the right plane that allows us to orient our 2D sketches and then protrude them out or extrude them out to a 3-dimensional model. So when I first go back to my drawing, I notice that I've got the front view as my main view. I'm going to work on creating this main view right here on the front plane in SOLIDWORKS. So I'm going to sketch this overall outside profile on my front plane in SOLIDWORKS. Let's move back. So our first step is to hit extrude. Next, I want to pick the plane I want to draw the 2D sketch on. So I'm going to click on the front plane, and what happens is that becomes normal to my view, and then it brings up the sketch tools to draw the 2-dimensional sketch. Now, the origin is right here, the red line, or the red axes, X and Y technically. And what I want to do is I always want to lock a piece of my sketch into the origin or relate my sketch dimensions to the origin so that the sketch can be fully defined. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with my line tool. I'm going to draw the overall shape by clicking my left mouse button once, dragging down the line, and if you notice, the little yellow icon is signifying a vertical relationship. If I move off from the vertical point, that line goes away and my line will no longer be vertical. So I want to make sure I create a vertical line. I move over, I make a horizontal line, another vertical line, and also notice I'm not actually sizing it at this point. I'm just drawing it very close to the final dimensions. Draw another horizontal line, a vertical line, horizontal line, and a vertical line. Then I'm going to come to right around here, click my left mouse button, then if I flick my wrist in an arc direction, it creates an arc. I click my mouse button, I'm back to my line tools. So again, I'm going to show you that off on the screen on the side right here. If I draw a straight line, click my mouse button, then I flip my wrist, it'll automatically create an arc for you. I'm going to press escape. I'm going to highlight that line tool and hit delete to delete that line. So now I've got the overall kind of profile drawn for my front view. It's time to use the Smart Dimension tool in order to apply dimensions and size my 2D sketch. So moving back to the drawing, you'll see the overall, or the length, is 2.5 and 1.5. Let's apply that right now. So I move back to SOLIDWORKS. I click on Smart Dimension, and I click from this line to that line and drop down. I'm going to make that 2.5. Check mark. The first dimension you place scales the rest of the drawing. So notice it didn't change size. However, this one right here, when I click on the line and drag down, click my mouse button, it's actually 1.5. I now need to look back at my sketch or my 2D drawing and figure out the rest of the dimensions. Looking at the part, I have an overall distance of 4.75. So I'm going to move back to SolidWorks and go from this line to that line, clicking my mouse button, dragging it down, clicking my mouse button one more time, typing in 4.75. The overall lengths have been fully defined here. Now, I need to go ahead and place this arc in the correct locations. So if I click from center point to the edge, I can go ahead and drag up and type in 3.5 inches. That moves the radius to the proper location. At this point, I need to know the radius size. So if I move back to my drawing, I'll see the radius is 0.5. So if I go back to SolidWorks, we'll go ahead, click down, drag out, and we'll do 0.5. Now, you'll see as we add dimensions to the model, we start to define the model's size and location with respect to the origin. So you'll notice there's three lines left that are not defined. They are this blue line right here for this height, this blue line right here for this height, and last but not least, this blue line right there for that height. Now, what I can do is I can go back to my drawing, and I notice that the overall height is 1.75 and the keyway is 0.75. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move back to SolidWorks, and I'm going to smart dimension from that line to the upper line, and that dimension is 1.75. Well, notice if I go from here to here, this dimension is 0.75. The last but not least, we could dimension this line at 0.75 as well, or we could come up here to add a relationship. And if I click on this line and that line, I can make them collinear, which will end up fully defining the actual sketch. Notice everything is turned black. So I can use relationships by adding a relationship to define the sketch, or I can use smart dimension tools. Now, the next step to make it go from a 2D sketch to a 3D part model is to exit your sketch. At this point, the model flips around to the isometric view and allows me to key in or pull a certain distance out for my parametric sketch. So looking over here, the distance of 1.28, that's not correct. It'd be actually pretty hard to pull it to the exact length that you would like. So normally you key in a 3D distance to extrude out right here in the left menu. So when I click on my drawing, I see that it needs to extrude out 1.5 inches. So at this point, I'll go ahead and go back to SolidWorks and type in 1.5 in the actual extrude menu and hit check mark. I have created my first extrusion. Notice every feature you create in SolidWorks, it's like modeling with clay, you either add or remove material. Once you add material, you're able to then do cuts and remove material, which we'll be doing next. So when I move back to the drawing, I notice that 2.5-inch holes are on the top view of my drawing. So I need to make 2 through holes on the top view. To do that, I'll go back to SolidWorks and I'll click on Extruded Cut. We'll learn about the hole wizard later on. We're just going to use the cut menu for now. So when I click Extruded Cut, it's asking me to click on a plane on where I'd like to make my cuts. So I'm going to click on the top plane of the part. Now you'll see the 2D sketch tools are active, and I could technically start sketching in the isometric view like you see right here. But I'm going to hit escape and in that tool real quick and change the view normal to my face. So when I hit spacebar, I can actually pick all the different views right here. Or let's say I didn't know what view I actually had here, such as the top view, which would be this button. I could easily click normal to, it's my favorite view button, and that brings the sketch normal to my view. It's also a Control 8. So when I go ahead and again that's spacebar and normal to, or Control 8 if you like fast keys or hotkeys. Now if you wanted this menu to stay up for orientation, notice there's a little pin right here. If I pin it and I start clicking on other views, the view box or the orientation box stays active. I'm not a big fan of keeping things pinned to my window, so I'm going to unpin it and click back on top view. Now, we're going to create two circles, and we're going to define their size and location with respect to the part model we just created. So I'm going to click on my circle tool. Notice there's circle and perimeter circle, but I'm going to click on regular circle. I'm going to drag a circle out. If I really wanted to, I could get a midpoint relationship like that, then drag it out, but I'm still going to define it with a smart dimension so it can't move. Now at this point, I've got two circles. Notice they're not fully defined, their size and locations. So to do that, I'm going to click on smart dimension, and I'm going to first define their size. Their size is 1/2 of an inch. So if I click on the outside edge of the circle, drag up, and key in 0.5, the size changes. Now, I'm going to click on the outside of the other circle, and I'm going to relate this circle size to the first circle. To do that, I can click the dimension key, I can write equals, and type in that dimension and press enter. So now, this circle relies on this circle's size. So if I was to double click back on the dimension and change it to 0.625, both circles change size. But again, 0.625 is incorrect, so I'm going to double click back on there, type in 0.5. I like to show you extra tips along the way. Hey, why not? So now that their size is located, their size is specified, I'm going to go ahead and select the location. So I'm going to locate this circle from the top edge and drag the dimension out. At this point, let's say I knew the part was 1.5 overall and it's right in the middle, so I could do math. If I was bad at math and didn't know that it was 0.75, I could do 1.5 divided by 2, tab, and check mark. That'll go ahead and make it 0.75. Double click to show you. Again, let me show you that again. You click on the edge of the circle, edge of the part, edge of the circle, edge of the part, drag out, and this one's already at 0.75. But let's say we wanted it to do math, we could go ahead and do 1.5 divided by 2, enter, which is exactly the same as it already had, 0.75. So now, notice the circles aren't fully defined yet. They can't move up and down in respect to like the y-axis, but they can move technically back and forth in the x-axis right there because nothing defines it or places them there. So we need to do that with a smart dimension or a relationship technically. We don't have any features to relate the center of the circle to at the moment. So we're going to have to use smart dimension. When I click on smart dimension, I click from the edge of the circle to the edge of the part, and I actually forgot this dimension. So I'm going to place it. I'm going to go back to my drawing. You'll notice it actually is 0.375, right? Because if we have 4.75 and we have 4 and 0.375, I related it from there. Technically, you should relate it from where you see it on the drawing, but the solid model is perfect technically, even though I told you nothing's perfect. But since it's perfect, I can go ahead and just dimension it off of that edge for now. But good practice would be to copy where the dimensions come from on the drawing. So if I move back to SOLIDWORKS, I can type in 0.375 and enter. Notice the circle turned to black, which means it's fully defined. At this point, I'm going to click the edge of the circle, the edge of the part, drag down, and type in 0.375. Now I have two fully defined sketch entities, hence the two half-inch circles fully located. At that point, I'm going to hit Exit Sketch. I'm going to hold my middle mouse button down and rotate. And if you see, we've got some options over here. If I pick blind and I pick like 0.25, I would only cut those circles 1/4 of an inch down from the top of the part. I want to go all the way through. So I could drag all the way through if I wanted to. It's not truly the correct way, but it would work. It still works. But what I want to do is I could pick through all, which goes through everything in my model, or another one would be up to surface. I could click on that surface and it would make it through the part. So there's actually more than one right answer on how far to go down. Or up to next does the same thing, or does up to the next break where there's no material. I'm going to pick up to next because that's technically the right way to do it. Well, they're all the right way, as long as you make the model that has the correct dimensions that you intended for your design. So because I picked up to next, I'm going to simply hit check mark. Now I have some holes located in my part. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go File, Save As. I want to save my model. It's a good idea to save often just in case the computer crashes. It's been known to happen with SOLIDWORKS. And I'm going to go to my 144 lab manual, Assignments, SOLIDWORKS Intro to Modeling. I'm going to put part number 1, video example, and save. I would recommend just saving the part as your last name, and that way you know it's your model. So when I hit spacebar and I hit isometric, you're going to see this isometric view should match the isometric view you have on your drawing. When I go back to SOLIDWORKS, I'm going to show you a couple other little things. I'm going to show you the Evaluate menu. If I wanted to go ahead and measure something, I could hit the Measure tool, and I can measure the size of that circle. Notice it's diameter 0.5, and it shows me where the center is in the XYZ axes compared to the origin. Or I can click on this circle, it'll show me max distance from the circles, and it'll kind of show me where everything's being measured from. Now I can right click over here, Clear Selections, and I can measure from the top to the bottom. It'll give me a distance. So the Measure tool is really handy in measuring models and figuring out the different sizes of features on a model. We'll use the Measure tool a little bit more in upcoming videos. At this point, we're ready to create an engineering drawing. So I'm going to press Save, and I'm going to go ahead and join you in the next video to make the engineering drawing for this part.